call, yeah, with the training thing.
That was pretty interesting.
All right.
I'm excited. I think it might work. I hope.
I hope so.
Ian says
Yeah.
he got it, so hopefully he'll hop on
All
here.
right. Hey, all right. All right, we're live.
Yes, we are.
We have 48 people watching. Let's test it out and see. All right, loud and clear so far. All right, hey everybody. Sorry we got cut off so quickly last time. We had some technical difficulties. Welcome.
I think it was all Jasmine's fault.
It was all my fault. It's
I
because
agree.
it was because I didn't want to answer any questions.
Clearly Jasmine's fault. So, all right, I think we have everybody here. Good afternoon. Thanks for adjusting to the new time. Hopefully people will catch up with that and it won't be too disruptive. The reason we went to the new time is because some other meetings got scheduled on top of us, and it was not the kind of meeting that's particularly easy to reschedule, given the people who were involved and how many different groups they represent. So here we are at 3 o'clock. We'll see if this time works. I know we don't have quite as many as we usually have. And my radio is loud. So we will go ahead and get started. We'll start with the usual update. I can share my screen here. So this is this afternoon's dashboard. Almost 29,000 cases in the state of Florida, 649 in Pinellas. Deaths, unfortunately, have ticked up a little bit to 21, as have hospitalizations. But again, some of that is related to all the activity at our skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facilities. So this is the current breakdown here. This is the age distribution we're seeing. So we're still seeing a pretty broad age distribution, and we're still seeing that the number of new cases day by day is very much sort of fluctuating. Now, you could say that there seems to be a general downward trend here, and I certainly am hopeful that that's the case. I do have a little bit of hesitation related to how many people are actually being tested or not being tested, and who is selectively being tested. So that's an important point, that these numbers of positive cases are based upon testing, and there's been a couple of different rounds of testing criteria as to who can get a test over the course of this thing. So a lot more to come on testing in the next week or so. I think you're all probably seeing that in the news, that from the president on down, everybody's talking about testing, guiding, reopening strategies. There was even the first meetings, I believe, of the Florida task force on reopening today going on. So hopefully we'll start to see some interesting and thoughtful strategies to get us reopened. As you all may know, the governor's order about staying at home and non-essential businesses does expire next week. I know that we're starting to see a little bit of a increase in our volume, a little bit closer to normal. I certainly experienced that yesterday in my ER shift. So it would appear that the volumes are on the way back up. And so that's the general update. I think I'll stop there in terms of the situation, because I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with what's going on. The next thing I wanted to throw up, wow, that is an amazing picture of Ian. Looks like a high school yearbook picture or something. That's what you get for going on hold on the live stream there, Chief. So the next thing, there, that got him to come back. So the next thing I wanted to throw up is a quick bit of awareness and I will try to share this one again as well. This is in process of making its way out through the usual channels, and this is related to the filters. You all may recall that in the category yellow treatment sheet, one of the things that we had listed in terms of a mitigation or safety strategy was to put a filter in between the top of the endotracheal or king tube and the BVM, remembering that our BVMs come with filters on them already. So we want to keep those in place. And then we're going to add a filter again in between the tube and the side stream sampler. So this document went out. The actual filters are making their way out. So keep your eyes open for this. Take a little while to read and digest and make sure you understand, and we'll come back to it on our next one and answer any questions that anybody has. But again, don't be surprised to see this stuff coming out. And Jasmine, did you make this an assignment in Target yet, or it's only gone to the EMS chief so far? You're muted.
It is already assignment in Target. It went out this afternoon.
Perfect. So everybody should be on the heads up for that, and making sure that we understand how to use that stuff. And then if there's any questions on it, we'll try and address it next time. But we'll give you guys the opportunity to look at it and put your hands on the stuff and make sure we can answer any of your questions next time. So that's number one. Number two is you probably all saw a medical control directive go out in the last day or so. And I will throw that one up here as well. This is the medical control directive that went out with the updated 1, 2, 3, 4 placard. And again, this was updated in relation to some of the strategies for PPE utilization, as well as for the fact that the ambulances or a lot of ambulances are now being staffed with 3-person crews, which would eliminate the need for an FD ride-in on some patients. And so that's a good thing. Attached to the medical control directive, which again should be in your target solutions, there's a markup version that highlights the changes. Here it is. And then there's a clean version, which is what should get posted out everywhere for you to see. And I will try to bring up just the clean one here. Oriented the right way, that would be good. Okay. So here's the clean one. And again, it's the same goal overall, is to minimize unprotected exposures. We heard your feedback that you'd like a little bit more clarity and direction on what questions we want to be keying on, et cetera. So we actually included the actual flu-like symptoms and questions that we're keying on. These are equivalent to the same as what's in the RIP questioning that the 911 operators are doing, and what's in the 36 card, the pandemic card that the 911 operators are questioning people on. So we thought we'd just put this out here for you all to see as well, and be a little bit more specific about what is respiratory or GI infectious-like symptoms. And then what we tried to do is walk through in a very deliberate and stepwise fashion how we can best utilize our PPE to keep ourselves safe as we're going through this, trying to minimize overuse, trying to minimize underuse, and keep everybody just as safe as possible. And again, adding the addition that if there's a 3-person ambulance crew that can handle the loading, unloading, decon, and patient care, then that would mean that a FD medic doesn't necessarily have to ride in. So why don't we just start with Chief Slaughter. Did you have any opening comments on this thing or anything you wanted to say about it before we get to questions from the group?
I just wanted to say that, you know, these changes are really related to, we understand the crews and the people in the field are the ones that have to ultimately make these decisions and make these choices. And that the expectation is that you do everything you can to protect yourself and to protect the people around you, no differently than we do on every other call. Safety is your utmost concern, and y'all's safety is our utmost concern. So please please, please make sure that you're familiar with these items. Do your best to err on the side of caution, but never go below the minimum. And I can't stress that enough. We have just seen the way things run rampant. The nursing homes are a great example because the way things run rampant through those nursing homes is really, really shows how quickly and how easily things can run through a small community spread. So just make sure you're really familiar with it and do everything you can to protect yourself. That's
Thank
it.
Richard Shump, I think you're on the phone. Anything you wanted to comment?
Resuming call.
I just want to say I appreciate everybody's patience with the changes, and we're doing the best we can to communicate it to you. And again, what Chief Slatterer said, base PPE on everybody. If in doubt, make sure you upgrade your PPE to the full ensemble. And hopefully this is going to help everybody make good decisions. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Chief Womack, any comments?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think Chief Schlatter and Richard covered it. We appreciate you guys being diligent about this. The only thing I would encourage you is same cross-check we do when we're treating patients, we should be doing on PPE. Help everybody implement with the guidances we're giving here. And then again, we can't prescribe everything. So just take a moment. It's okay to always take a second to think through your situation to take the safest approach needed.
Awesome. Jasmine, any thoughts?
I did a little video that went out there to help try to explain this. I am getting a few more questions on it. If there's anything else that we could clarify further, then shoot some of those questions up in the comments.
Great. Okay, so what I think we'll do then, since this has been out, it's been on target, there's a training video, there's the whole package. I think what we'll do is stop there for a minute and just take whatever questions you might have on this. So let's see what people say.
Yeah.
I guess there's no questions. It's
small group today, since we're an hour earlier. I can throw some things out there that I've gotten. I have a question about who's deconning the first medic if the first medic went in and doesn't write in. So the FD medic doesn't write in, but he put on PPE and went in. So another similar question was inner facilities. I don't know if Richard can answer this. The inner facilities on Sunstar going from the hospital back to the facility deconning. Both of the questions were based on decon for people going back available.
So if they're taking a positive COVID patient to a nursing home, what we're doing is we're routing them either to the local hospital or to one of our hubs to complete the appropriate proper decon. And it has to be a 3-person crew.
Okay, Chief Womack or Chief Slatter on the question about deconning the first FD medic that makes patient contact if they then don't subsequently ride in. Is the rest of their crew going to be handling that, or is there a specific procedure?
I believe Chief Womack has already put something out on that. Ian, can you comment?
Yeah, we've issued guidance on how to doff and decon. We have those materials on each of the units individually. So, you know, the FD personnel don't have to get to the hospital to doff and decon themselves and get back in service. The hospital decon stations are just kind of extra assistance stations, especially for the Sunstar units, but FD should be able to do that without them. If that's not across the system, then we can certainly, I think we have already shared that out with the ops chiefs and EMS chiefs, but we can reshare it if needed.
And then there was another question from Caitlin that says, if FD already has somebody in full PPE who has made patient contact first Then a 3-person Sunstar crew arrives. If the patient is being transported, shouldn't FD just ride in to conserve PPE, utilizing 2 sets of PPE instead of 3 sets?
Do you want me to answer on that?
Sure.
Or do you? I would say that would be correct. If you were going to have the other Sunstar put on 2 sets, then we could continue to ride in as we do now. But if they're going to be in baseline PPE for the ride in, then you wouldn't need the FD ride in person to go along. But I would say that is correct, that the FD person should go ahead and ride in versus having the 2 Sunstar medics have to put on full PPE for the ride in. Ian, you got anything extra on that?
Well, cautiously, I don't want to speak out of turn. So it's going to be something for either Champ or the doc to weigh in on. But my initial inclination would be if it's a BLS patient that doesn't require 2 people in the back, that 3rd person could still ride up front and not expose themselves and necessarily burn a set of PPE. We're still net 2 sets of PPE. That's one of those things they just need to look at the situation and make the most appropriate decision. If we do need a rider in the back for that patient, then it would make sense for FD to still continue in.
Yes, I think
I believe.
Oh, go ahead, Richard.
I was going to say, I believe that the placard has some latitude there where we do understand that we may use another set of PPE, but it can be appropriate for the FD personnel to go available and the 2 Sunstar people on a 3-person crew don their PPE for the transport. And it should be situational dependent, like Chief Slatterer said.
Yeah, and I think the important point, though, right, is that it takes 2 people to safely load and unload somebody who we're having on precautions, and so those 2 people need to be fully PPE'd out. So if we're treating this as a potential COVID patient, then it's 2 people and a full set of PPE minimum. And so initially when we started this, that was going to be the first arriving medic from the fire department and then the Sunstar medic, and that was the reason for the fire medic riding in. But now in some cases, there may be 2 medics on the Sunstar truck, which would alleviate the need for the fire medic riding in some cases. It is true that may cause an extra set of PPE to be utilized, but that's a resource management decision. The follow-up question to that is from Holly, which says, on an alert patient with a 3-person ambulance crew, it was stated that FD is still required to ride to the hospital. Why is this necessary when there are already 2 medics present? And I think we want to be very clear that in some cases, the second medic or the 3rd member of the Sunstar crew may be a provisional medic, or maybe somebody who we wouldn't normally say is appropriate to ride in as the second fully qualified person at that category red's patient side. So we want to be clear that if we do have a critical patient like that, we really want to make sure that we've got 2 fully certified and credentialed county medics at the patient side. This is going to be fluid, and we're going to have to ask you guys to use good judgment and to make sure that we're doing the best to protect ourselves and be smart about our resource utilization. But again, this is going to be a fluid situation. So there's a couple other questions related to this. Ryan, I hope best judgment with PPE is an appropriate concept for a group of professionals who are keeping themselves and their patients safe. So I realize that we oftentimes try to have some pretty concrete standards, but I also think that there's times for people to act as professionals and make sure that they're protecting themselves. And so, just the same way I can't write you a protocol for what to do in every last situation, there has to be some judgment in which protocol we're working under. There also has to be some appropriate professional judgment here about how to keep yourself safe. Chris says, more often I hear there are 2 EMTs on the Sunstar trucks, not medics. And that's correct. In some cases, there may be different crew makeups on the trucks. I'm not sure if Richard wants to comment on that, but the idea is to make sure that we are not altering the standard of care for these patients, but making sure that we have appropriate resources to safely load, unload, decon, et cetera.
Resuming call.
So my comment to that is currently, I think we're at the number of 23 people in our probationary period learning. So those folks are riding third on units. And then we're adding up to 20 personnel, 20 trucks during the 24-hour period for a third person. So those are separate areas. And so the clinicians will have to identify who's in training and who is not in training. But it is a mix of EMTs and paramedics.
Yeah. So again, we're going to have to ask you guys to be aware of what your resources are there on scene and make good decisions about ensuring the best care for the patient and the best safety for the crews. Billy Stark asked, can we please have some way to identify the Sunstar crew that's responding as a 3-person crew? I'm not sure that that's feasible as things are very fluid. Billy, and LaFemme says he's been advising that he's got 3 on board with 2 medics when he's en route, I guess is a way of doing crew resource management and coordinating resources. Okay, what other questions do we have on this? Cool. All right, so hopefully this allows us to kind of settle into something that works. We will listen to your feedback and as a group try and make any adjustments that we think we need to. Hopefully this gets us where we need to be. And again, I certainly apologize for the miscommunication around all of this over the last week or so. We will try to do better.
So I hear there's a lot of questions about updates and changes in the EPCR. I don't know that I have all the answers for those, but I actually haven't had any specific questions. I just hear that there's some confusion. So if you guys have EPCR questions, we can take those too, and get the answers if we need them.
Okay, so I'm going to answer these last couple of questions coming in. Riley says, could we not do the SR designation for the 3-man Sunstar crews? We'll throw that in the mix and see what people think on that, Riley. So on a Sunstar 3-person crew, can it be the same medic and a Sunstar EMT that ride in the back, leaving the fire medic to go back available? And Chris sort of has the same question. So the clear message is, if the FD medic is already in full PPE before Sunstar arrival, do they have to ride in, or can they have a 3-person Sunstar crew handle, even if that means burning another set of PPE? What's the answer of the group on that?
Resuming call.
From Richard's perspective, when we discussed it, the answer in his group, we realized that we may be using an extra set of PPE to do this, but it is approved by Craig.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Chiefs, is that your understanding? That is an acceptable course of action?
That is my understanding as an acceptable course of action. Just making sure that, we take care of the patient first, that we're not doing it on, critical patients where the second medic or that medic is needed, especially if the crew's split or you're talking about having provisional person riding backwards, that it's really strictly for patient transport on the stretcher. And
yeah. Okay, so again, to try and summarize, it would be acceptable in some cases for the FD medic to not ride in even after having made initial patient contact in full PPE. But clearly, if you had a critical patient or an alert patient and you did not have 2 fully certified county medics that were going to be riding in the back of that Sunstar unit, then you would still have an obligation to continue caring for that patient and ride in with them.
Doc, if I could just maybe add one thing to that, just to keep in mind. As a system, our volume's still way down. So, the same urgency that may be felt by the first responder crews to get back available, to catch the next call, keep coverage up, isn't there to the same level that it always is. So, if you have an opportunity to still ride in and the system's not being overdrawn or tasked, and save a set of PPE, that's probably the more appropriate decision. Again, we're trying to leave you guys some decisional capacity here, everybody's favorite word, out there in the field as you make your operational decisions. So just those are the kind of elements to keep in mind.
Great.
I agree with that. Thanks, Ian.
And we will of course remain open to feedback and suggestions about how this is working. All right, so there was some discussion of EPCR stuff from Jasmine, and somebody from Sunstar Clinical Services chimed in. The what's new in the EPCR and the SNP. What's the SNP? Walkthrough documents explain most questions. So is this on every tablet, Sunstar Clinical Services, or is this an internal Sunstar thing?
So what's new should pop up whenever you turn
That's
it.
everybody, right?
Yeah. Turn it
Yeah,
on.
so check the what's new on your EPCR, and hopefully that'll guide you through all the changes and clarify everything. And then maybe we should arrange to have somebody who's a EPCR expert join us for next week's YouTube.
I think we could probably do that.
Great.
And we can use that document and go through that if we need to.
Okay. There was a question up here from Chief Magnus about long-term care facilities and an update on what EMS is doing to try and support them. So the situation is this: we have seen not only in Pinellas County, but in some of our neighboring counties and even across the country, that residents of long-term care facilities and that meaning nursing homes and assisted livings are at particularly high risk from this virus. This is likely by virtue of their age and underlying medical comorbidities. And so we know that if a elderly person with lots of medical problems who is somewhat limited in how robust their immune system or their ability to compensate for a metabolic insult is, we know that in general, those people are probably going to do worse. We've also seen, as I mentioned, some pretty significant case clusters within facilities. And some of those, it appears, have been due to difficulties with performing adequate infection prevention and infection control measures. And so after we started to see a pattern that maybe that was systemic and related to the normal level of care delivered in these facilities versus an acute care facility. For instance, if you've never been asked to wear an N95 mask before and you're suddenly asked to take care of a patient where you need to wear an N95 mask, that could pose some problems in terms of knowledge, competency, availability of equipment, having been fit tested in the past, et cetera. So I think part of what's going on here is that this is a new challenge for all of us, and in some cases is outside of the normal realm of practice of some of our facilities. And so because we at Fire and EMS have expertise in PPE utilization, dealing with hazardous environments, doing infection control, deconning our equipment and our vehicles, and interfacing with acute care settings and skilled nursing type settings. I think we're in a unique position based on that expertise, as well as based on the size of our workforce, to be able to help our community partners here in the skilled nursing facilities to quickly acquire as much of those competencies, equipment, supplies, training, and sort of all other support that we could bring to bear to make them as successful as possible, with the goal of really protecting these vulnerable patients that live within these facilities. And so, like any other hazard in the community that we were that we became aware of, we would want to take a mitigation strategy and prevent that harm, no different from fire prevention or drowning prevention or any of these other things that we do. And because we've become aware that there's this potential need, and we have all these at-risk people. The goal is to leverage our expertise, our resources, and do as much as we can to help these folks. There was one analogy earlier today that we are going to try and circle the wagons around these vulnerable members of our communities and make sure that we're bringing all resources to bear to protect them. So that's the overall goal. The specifics of how that's going to look, who's going to do that, what kinds of things are going to happen, may be variable between different jurisdictions and agencies and facilities. But that's the overall goal, Chief Magnus. I hope I kind of laid that out for what it is we're trying to accomplish. Obviously, once they get cases in the facilities, things are a little bit different. We need to get in there with a bunch of experts from DOH, et cetera, and get things under control. But most of, I think, what we're going to be focused on primarily is getting them up to speed and preventing cases from entering the facilities in the first place, and making sure that the staff members at those facilities have the resources to keep themselves safe and to keep the patients safe. Billy says, nursing facilities that have known positive COVID residents, should we be, I think he means donning up in full prior to entry, or is baseline PPE acceptable to enter? So that's an interesting question, Billy. I think there's some latitude there as well, depending on the situation. Now, if we were going to that facility that had dozens and dozens of cases, and we had very little evidence that there was good sanitation and infection control going on, I think it makes sense to go in already protected. However, when I walk into the hospital, there are clearly COVID patients within my hospital, and I am not wearing full PPE at all times within that building because those folks are in particular areas or particular rooms with the door shut. So I would be hesitant to make a blanket statement that every facility that has a COVID patient in it, you need to be in full PPE through the entire facility. I would also point out that the list you saw from the state that came out lists if they have had any cases in there. It is not necessarily the same as if there is a current case in there. And also a case in a staff member, I believe, would have them on that list, not just a patient. So it may be a little bit too big a step to say that just because a facility has been on that list, you need to have PPE on the entire time. Jasmine, we can hear John. So hopefully that answers your question, Billy. But if there's a facility of particular concern or where we know that there's something active going on, it might be reasonable. But in general, just because a facility was on that list that the state released, I wouldn't necessarily say you have to be in it the whole time.
I have, so in the training, we discussed that you're going to stand 6 feet away, but if you're going into a residence where it's a situation that's unknown, or you're going deep into a nursing facility, that you're going to have to use your judgment. Our baseline PPE is obviously a higher level. We've raised that level because there's asymptomatic spread all around us. So you need to be cautious in any situation that you're going into, and be aware that the people around you everywhere, you could have a COVID patient around you.
Yeah. I mean, another reason for the baseline PPE, right, is that minimizes the risk of your exposure, whether it's from a facility where there's cases, or just somebody walking down the street, who doesn't know they have it. Mitchell says, I think Mitchell's making a joke, so we'll skip that one.
Hey, Doc, do you mind if I comment on that just
Please.
real quick? The other thing people need to remember is our baseline PPE is keeps you at a low risk, or if you come in contact even with somebody with active COVID. So if you go in your baseline PPE and you make a 6-foot assessment of any patient, you are not considered an exposure. You're not even considered a contaminant unless you were to get into a situation where you were aerosolized, or you were doing procedures that put you in a contact of longer than 1 to 2 minutes with that patient. So our walking into a nursing home in our baseline PPE is very appropriate. you're taking the steps that you need to take to keep yourself as a low risk exposure. And then you utilize your skills and your talents to make a good assessment prior to breaking that 6-foot rule, basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's the whole purpose of the baseline PPE, is to keep us relatively safe, even when we don't know what we're walking into. So let's see. Yeah, Billy, that's one of the reasons why we want to go make sure that they have all the resources and expertise they need to effectively do infection control. Stephen, it looks like Chris answered your question, and I would say that yes, his answer is correct, that the RIP note is a heads up to you, but should not be the only factor that goes into your assessment of the situation. Just as a scene safety note would not be the only factor that goes into your assessment of your safety on a scene. It's a tool for you. It's one thing to take into consideration, but it is not the entire picture. All right, another one. Have we seen an increase this week in long-term facility cases? So you probably saw on the news that we were, you probably saw on the news that we took several patients out of another facility earlier in the week. And so there are a couple of facilities that have multiple cases in them. The one that we evacuated last week was the biggest one. The one from earlier in this week had some cases as well. And then there's a third facility down in South County that has some cases. And those are the ones that are the highest on everybody's radar, I think. The overall number of cases has climbed a little bit, Chief, and that's partly a result of increased testing. For example, there are supposed to be National Guard teams who are coming in to help augment sample collection from some of these facilities. So a large number of additional tests may be sent over the next couple of days, which then we would expect to see an increase in the number of cases potentially related to that. Chief Jameson points out something that could not be more important, is that through all of this, and frankly, compared to some other systems, we are taking a conservative PPE approach in terms of, doing our absolute best to keep you guys safe. The PPE approach is working so far. We have not had, to the best of our knowledge, and knock on wood, any occupational exposures that have resulted in one of our people becoming infected with COVID-19. And so that's a credit to the level of resources that we've dedicated to this. It's a credit to you all being smart and using your brains out there and taking proactive steps to keep yourself safe. It's a credit to the dispatchers who are working really hard to get as much information for you before you show up as possible. And so I'm extremely pleased that that's the case, and I really hope it stays that way. I wish I could say the same thing, Chief. All right, what other questions do we have? Peter says, can we continue these Q&A sessions post-COVID for other EMS related questions? Yeah, maybe not twice a week though.
Occasionally, maybe.
Maybe a little less frequently would be nice, but sure, we can talk about that, Peter. All right. What else do you guys have? We'll give you a couple more minutes here to catch up with the stream and ask any of your last questions. We do plan on doing this again next week. We may actually settle into the 3 p.m. hour instead of the 4 p.m. hours. We're doing a lot of nursing home coordination at the 4:30 time slot, which is why we had to drop off last week. So Chief Womack looks like he needs an Advil. Chief Slatter, did you want to talk about your mask decon initiative a little bit?
Sure. So we are up and running with mass decontamination using hydrogen peroxide vaporization process. We had a little bit of trouble with not the first process, but the second and third process. We then we're able to realize we changed something. We did something differently. It was just related to visqueen and what we had visqueened off from the first process to the second and third. And since then, we've had two more successful processes, and we did a process as well today, and we'll know tomorrow. We'll verify that that process was successful. We did have Bay News 9 in today, filming our process and how we go through it. So you'll see that out tomorrow. And we're going to be letting county emergency management know that the process is up and running. And if we have partners that would like us to sterilize their N95 masks, we can do so. We're currently sterilizing masks mostly for Sunstar. We keep our own masks as well, and we're sterilizing those and just kind of putting them away for a rainy day. And then Sunstar is going to be getting back their masks in the next couple of days. We have several hundred for them to go back. And the one thing I do want to ask people and to pass along is one of the biggest problem we're having with the masks when we get them is makeup. If a mask is dirty with makeup, we throw it away. So on the last process of 300 that we did for Bay News 9, we lost about 8% of the masks. We had to throw them away. So I did ask Richard to pass along to his people if they can reduce makeup wear for the folks that are still wearing N95s. That would be great. Or just wear it like from the eyes up, maybe something like that. But it is one of the identified problems too in the Duke study that makeup. Duke University, their hospitals actually are not allowing makeup currently, so that it doesn't wreck the mask. So,
What will I do without my foundation, Chief?
yes, I know. You get that little extra shine, but
We're up over here, right?
yeah.
So that's awesome. I'm really impressed with what you guys have been able to put together with that. I think it's worth noting that other people are deconning masks as well. This isn't unique to us, but the process that Pinellas Park and Chief have put together is really a robust process and pretty impressive. And based on the literature that's out there, probably the best process to be using right now.
Yeah, it definitely is the best one for it doesn't damage the masks. The other processes are all damaging masks. The other thing too, this for you, Doc, too, is the stubble.
Yep.
The stubble will eventually erode the masks in the bottom. So if people could that are wearing N95s, if you can try to stay a little better clean shaven, it'll protect the masks.
So that levels the playing field a little bit. The guys have to stay clean shaven and the girls have to stop wearing makeup.
No, you can wear it just from your eyes up.
Just this level.
Yep, there you go.
Keep your N95 on all day.
Amazing. So, okay, that's fantastic. What other, we'll give everybody another minute or so to get in any last questions, and then we'll try and call it an afternoon because I know everybody's got lots going on. And if you're not running calls and you're not doing stuff like this, take a nap. I know I would want one right now. Let's see if we got any other questions. Don't see anything coming through yet. Oh boy. All right. So I guess the last thing I want to say is just to, again, thank you all for what you're doing out there, particularly related to these cases at the nursing home or the nursing homes. To go out there knowing that you're going into a place where there's lots and lots of cases, and to still be calm, reassuring, comforting to the patients that you're dealing with coming out of there when you're in full PPE and dealing with the discomforts and the hassles of that, along with the unknown and facing this thing that the entire world has been scared of for months, head on and up close and personal. That takes a lot to do that, and to do that with compassion and with grace and with care for your patients. So I just want to thank you all for that again, for the Sunstar crews who went in there, for the fire crews who were supporting them, and in those particular operations, but even for just the regular calls that we're running day in and day out. When this thing started a long time ago, somebody said, holy smokes, this is going to be crazy, and somebody else said, yeah, but we're going to shine, and I think they're right. You guys are doing an amazing job, so thank you.
Doc, it looks like you're going to have another call next on the makeup situation. So
we need an EPCR expert and a makeup expert for next call.
yes,
Or update the placard.
update the placard. The makeup, just FYI, Holly, the makeup's not damaging them, but we throw away anything that's dirty. So if you drop it on the ground, step on it, we're going to throw that away too. But because you wouldn't want to receive back a mask that, we had one the first day that it looked like it was red makeup on it. Like, well, is that blood or is that makeup? We figured it wasn't blood on the inside of the mask, or we were hoping it wasn't blood on the inside of the mask. But yeah, so that's why we don't want to return dirty looking masks out either. They're sterile, but it's not a wash. We don't wash them. We don't put them in a wash machine. So.
Great. It looks like I did miss a question from Chief Jameson. Thank you for pointing that out, Michelle. Any word on the status of the antibody test, he said. Yeah, so this has been a struggle. Those tests were marketed initially under a special letter from the FDA dated March 17th, I believe, that allowed them to proceed with marketing and trying to sell these things without emergency use authorization from the FDA. The FDA has since been clarifying some of that, and currently our order has not yet been fulfilled due to some issues with FDA's updated guidance regarding CLIA issues. And for those of you who don't know, CLIA is the clinical laboratory, I don't know, it's the way you get a laboratory to be certified. And so there's some evolving guidance on that. And so we're still working through what this looks like and how we do this in a way that meets the FDA's requirements, meets the manufacturer's requirements, and is still useful to us in the immediate term. So I don't have a good update on that yet, other than to say that there's multiple moving parts in this, and we're doing our best to work through it as quick as we can. But I don't have an estimated date at this point. I believe we have a pretty solid plan for logistically how to do it, but that's going to be somewhat contingent on what the FDA says we have to do. I'm sort of hoping that we get some political leadership comes through and flattens out some of those speed bumps in the next couple of days to week, but it remains to be seen. So last question I see is from Mitchell, says, how much do you feel as though the nursing homes are the canary in the coal mine of a more systemic outbreak here in the county? Yeah, it is. So obviously the cases in the nursing homes, for the most part, at least the initial case in a nursing home, is going to come from a staff member who often acquired it out in the community, although sometimes that staff member may have come from a different facility where they acquired it. We have seen a significant number of staff members with infection. And we also know that the staff do move between these facilities in some cases. So that's a good question, Ryan. I don't have a lot of evidence of that yet, but it is a concern of mine. And you may have seen other people comment on that, or me comment on that yesterday on the County Board of Commissioners meeting, or 2 days ago. So I don't know exactly how that's going to look yet. What I do know, though, is if we do get multiple large-scale outbreaks within these facilities, that could very clearly put the strain on our hospitals that we've all been concerned might be coming. You take some of these facilities that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of folks within them, and if we end up having to take that volume of people to an acute care setting in a hospital, that's really going to be difficult, not only for us, but also for the hospitals in terms of their capacity and resources. So remains to be seen, Ryan, but it is very definitely a concern of mine. All right, I haven't seen anything else come through.
Sorry, I have 2 EPCR questions that are about the same, about patient signatures for possible COVID patients or patient signatures for patients that have had any signs of COVID, can they sign, or should they be asking them not to sign for possible contamination of the EPCR?
I'm not sure I quite fully understood that. The question is, if somebody is a potential COVID patient, should you hand them your PCR to sign?
Right. Well, I think we went over that. And then the other half of this question was if they have a possible COVID symptoms. So if there's any symptoms that could be a check mark on that list, can we have that stay away from the PCR?
Yeah.
I guess
Okay.
there's been some conflict in the answer to this question on calls.
All right. Sounds like something we should probably get a definitive answer to for next time. But it does bear a point that's worth highlighting, which is that any of those symptoms that we list there could be a symptom of COVID. And therefore, anybody who has any of those symptoms, you need to treat as a potential COVID patient and do the full PPE thing. And that's the whole point of asking those questions, is if any of them are positive, that you really need to protect yourself. So I did hear a little something about people being like, oh, well, it's just this or just that, and it's not really COVID. Again, our really aggressive posture is that with any of those symptoms, we need to be taking full precautions. All right, with that, I don't see any further questions at this point. So final comments from the chiefs?
All I have to say is be safe. Do what you guys are doing. I echo Chief Jameson's comments. No work-related cases that we are aware of currently is really, really tremendous. I certainly didn't think we were going to be there last month. I thought for sure I was planning all the way down to losing, 25 and 50% of our department in the workforce, and how we were going to manage that. So everybody's been just great. Don't get frustrated as things go along. It's still gonna play out. It's gonna be going for a while. This is not gonna end quickly, and just stay safe and work with each other, cooperate. We'll all get through it.
Richard?
Yeah, I'd like to say again, thanks for the dialogue and the conversation. We will continue to talk about it and get better. And to let everybody know, on the fire side, I'm working on an identifier that will be easily recognizable to you for a 3-person crew that has 3 fully system cleared people on it. So hopefully I'll have an answer to that, and we'll be able to meet that need.
Chief Womack?
Just the same thing. Thanks everybody for your work you're doing. Thank you for working hard to implement the direction and guidance that you're being given. The only thing I'd like to encourage the system on right now is just maintaining due diligence. Fortitude's going to be the thing for us right now as a measure of our success moving forward, because this is going to be, it already feels like a long-term event, and it's going to continue to be a long-term event. And we just don't want to see complacency slip in and we start assuming risks that are unnecessary. So keep each other honest, stay safe, work hard to implement what we're providing to you, and let us know where we can improve on those pieces as you guys readily have thus far. Thank you.
Jasmine? Muted. You're muted.
Thanks for tuning in again. I see that everybody's been taking the opportunity to watch these after they've been posted. So that's pretty good that everybody's interested in staying up to date on what's going on. If you have any other questions, if we need to address the EPCR, if the EPCR refusals or anything like that, please let me know and we can cover it next time. Sorry, we got a lot of noise over here.
Okay. I see one last minute question from Dana that is talking about dealing with family members of suspected patients. Dana, if you have any suspicion that anybody you're interacting with is potentially contagious, then yes, use your full PPE. All right. With that, we will end this one, and we will see you guys on Tuesday, I believe. And Jasmine, you're still on. And we will see you guys on Tuesday. And again, please be safe. Let us know what you need.
Everybody take care. Bye.